Greetings and salutations, dear viewers, and welcome back to the realm of Final Fantasy XIV. Apologies for missing the start of this video. I had to grab it from the Sor Kai recording. It got lost in the ether somewhere. But today we're going to be tackling the second dungeon added in the Expert Roulette in the most recent patch, which is Hullbreaker Island Hard Mode. So you may recall in the normal mode of Hullbreaker Island, it was effectively an abandoned island taken over by the wilderness that you were fighting your way through in search of Mistbeard's treasure. There were heavy implications that the Limsa Laminzan soldier who sent you out on this quest in the first place was the legendary Mistbeard himself. So since then, Limsa Laminza has reclaimed this place and turned it into a large gauntlet and training ground for its troops. In an attempt to whip them back into shape, they've had them all line up for you to come and bloody some noses, hopefully inspiring them to better themselves. This is going to be an interesting dungeon because we're going to be tackling Limsa Laminza's best. And for those of you unaware, their navy is made up of any number of trained warriors. They have a musketeer group as well as a marauder group, and even pirate groups are a part of their ranks. So for the warm-up, you're simply fighting a couple random beasts here and there, none of which pose much in the way of threat, at least not in that first round. A couple AoEs to not stand in, but not too much to worry about otherwise. In the second room, the large Waroches should be your first target, unlike what I'm doing, because this honestly was recorded in the same sitting as the previous one, and I was having a bad day. And by bad day, I mean stupid day. You want to tackle the big guy first because he uses a number of large, room-wide AoEs, and he just needs to be stunned and taken care of so he's not trouble anymore. I'm going to kill that battle bird and then go, okay, yeah, maybe I should kill this guy first. The battle bird himself really doesn't do anything of much note. That AoE, which I got out of, doesn't actually do anything to you. That AoE is not put down by any of the enemies, it's actually put down by the soldiers monitoring your progress. All it does is make the enemies stronger. So you will, at the very least, want to pull the enemies out of that AoE, but you can stand in it just fine. With them down, we can now move up and round the corner. There used to be some bees here, as I recall. Now there are jackals! Jackals, as you may recall, use a directional AoE, but other than that, there's not a lot to worry about here. Just standing there randomly in the middle of the road. Working our way up, this is where you would have found another one of the harpies. As well as a few monkeys, they've been replaced by a training coral. Just one, oddly enough. He does coral things, not a lot to concern yourself with. However, throughout the fight, as before, one of the various soldiers standing around will place down a large AoE that buffs up the enemy, and you will want to pull it out of the AoE. A little ways into the fight, a second large AoE will be put down on the ground that you'll want to pull the enemy out of again. Reminder that all these do is buff the enemy, they don't actually hurt you at all. When the coral goes down, the AoEs go away, we can cross the bridge where we once had poo flung at us, and make our way to the first boss. The first boss, by the way, is all, not just one, or the leader, or anything of the sort, all of the sirens. One of the all-female, or an all-female pirate group, and one of the single most powerful pirate groups assisting the Limsa military. And you get to take on all of them. That said, it's actually not that bad of a fight. I find it reasonably refreshing, all things considered. There are 2 or 3 various jobs that you're going to want to be paying attention to, as well as a coral that shows up partway through. The coral, of course, is tied to someone and will chase that person down. I don't believe you can take the tether off of the person that it's tethered to, so they will continue attacking that tethered target until it dies. So make sure the coral is your first priority. Your second priority is going to be any enemy, such as the Tar Girl here, that actually moves throughout the arena. The Tar Girl here, I believe, is a Marauder-type enemy and can be tanked. And then your last priority is going to be the Lodeswomen, who simply stand still and use directional AoEs on you. The reason they're the lowest priority is simply because it's very easy to step to the side of that AoE. They're there to mix things up while you're dealing with other enemies. So killing enemies that can do guaranteed damage to you is probably, or should probably be, your priority. And of course, throughout the fight, some of the sirens off to the side are going to be shooting cannons at you, so you'll be seeing a number of large circular AoEs appear just throughout the fight. We've seen thus far a large line of circles go across the arena. We've seen otherwise a number of circles appear all in the middle. And once you've been introduced to all the various enemies, it's time for, I guess, a final exam, as you have to fight off a coral, the Tar Girl, the other one, who I can't tell what job is, but it's the small LFL. Gunner? Why does it say gunner? They're using an axe. Not important. Taking them down is going to be your next priority after the coral, and then you follow up with the Lodeswomen. And that should be the fight, I think. We'll see if I'm forgetting a phase. But mostly, it's just, mostly the whole fight is simply knowing your attack priorities and not standing and stuff, and that should really be the fight. I like this fight, though. It's a mix-up from the normal fights, where you just have one guy you're beating down. Here, it could end whenever. It almost doesn't matter when it would end. You're just gonna keep piling through until they run out of people to throw at you. But now that you've shown the sirens who's boss, moving on, there's 2 Sasquatches. A Sasquatch was actually the first boss of Hullbreaker Island normal, and now they're just wandering around like nobody's business. Maybe we beat up the Big Daddy before, and since they've cleared out the island, they've found more of them. There's also a tiger over here, and the tiger acts very much like a coral. The Sasquatches just kind of punch you and may or may not have a cleave and ranged AoE, or if not AoE, a ranged targeted attack. A ranged attack? They hit you with something from a distance. There's not a lot to worry about with these guys, though. With the last pull down, we can continue up the road. We're actually going off the beaten path from where we went in normal mode. In normal mode, after the first boss, we went into a cave where we ran through the second leg, whereas our second leg here is actually going off to the side, further up the mountain, along the outside. Though, don't worry, we're going to be going in that cave soon enough. At the very top of this path, you'll find several Sasquatches. There are 3 around the outside of the arena, all chucking things at you, and 2 in the middle you're going to have to fight directly. Of course, the 2 in the middle aren't going to do anything the 2 that you fought before didn't do, and you're down a tiger. The only added bonus is that you have to dodge AoEs that the remaining 3 are going to be throwing at you. And then once you defeat the 2 of these, the 3 on the outside will all hop into the arena, and you've got to take down all 3 of them at once. It's really just a bunch of Sasquatches, though, and don't do anything we haven't seen plenty of times already. So, once the 3 hop in, power them down as well, and we can move on. There we go, the gate opens, or falls down, I guess, and we can move on to the next section, which just up this hill a little bit, you see a hole that we're going to jump in and take us back inside the cave. We finally made it. We're actually inside the cave this time. And you'll see 3 Ymir unshelled in front of you, who aren't really much of a threat, though they are, at least as far as I know, a fairly new enemy type. They don't do a lot aside from a conal AoE that's reasonably easy to dodge, though. Oh, and I suppose a targeted AoE as well. Apparently the Ymir get most of their power from their shells, because we just fought 3 of them without a shell as regular adds. And this one with a shell is a boss. Not only does it have a shell, but maybe, perhaps, it was also just bigger and stronger than the other ones, and considering they have been unshelled, perhaps this one, being big and strong enough, stole their shells. Who knows? This is the last of the large monsters that the Navy is going to be throwing at us before they start coming at us themselves. I think they're getting tired of the fact that we can just trounce everything they throw at us and really want a piece of that action themselves. Now this fight has 2 phases, really, and it should end on the... After the second phase, it'll go back to the first, and it should theoretically go back to that third phase once. And that's about it. Beat on it enough and it'll change shells. The attacks that we saw along the way there were a chain lightning, which does damage over time to everybody chained to the people chained together. Simply have to move far enough away from each other to break the chain, as well as a few targeted AoEs that will do electricity damage. But if you find these small white water circles in the arena, you can stand in them to disperse the electricity and not take any damage at all. This attack, on top of making the floor icy now that it's changed shells, also plants several of these large crystal AoEs, or large AoEs around the arena targeted on individual players. You want to place these as close together as possible without killing each other with the AoEs, because it's going to plop down a crystal that's going to explode after a brief time, and you want to be able to get as far away from those as possible. Granted, on ice, that may be a little bit tricky. Do enough damage and you'll break its second shell and it'll go back to its electricity shell, though have fun with that because the ground is still ice. So especially these attacks, like this one where you need to stand in the watery puddle, are a little hard to deal with when you're slip-sliding around the arena. But once the attack goes off, the floor is cleared of electricity. Ymir goes back to its regular pattern, having chain lightning attached to 2 people a little bit farther over, and you should be able to power it down the rest of the way on your own. Those are all the mechanics, and it will likely, as far as I know, simply repeat from here. So there's the water AoE going out, or a sludge of some kind, that all the people with the markers over their head need to stand in. The tank is chosen to not. But that defeats the boss, and we can move on. So watching the hero of Eorzea come in and simply tear up all the monsters that they've put out for them have gotten these guys a little riled up, and they're starting to want to test how good they can do themselves. So our last leg is going to be against Limsa Lominsa's best. Also, that giant cliff is still there, and you still have to jump down off of it. You'd think in setting this up as a training ground, they would have done something about that. So our first opponent is High Tide and Low Tide. I'm not too familiar with these two, perhaps they're brothers? But they are marauders and do a fair amount of damage, as they are wont to do. However, they don't do anything of terribly much threat. They've got a circular AoE and a conal AoE, as many marauder enemies do, but for the most part you can simply wear them down. Oh, and a directional AoE in front, I suppose. With no marker either, so you just have to wait for them to actually cast it. Oh no, never mind, it has an AoE marker. I guess I couldn't see it from that angle. So those two remain a little out of breath and quite exhausted, and a little bit impressed. But from here we can move on to the Barracuda. The Barracuda, I believe, are some of the thieves, ninjas, a little underground working, I guess you could say. So of the 3 of them, the one in the middle you can tank as normal. It'll follow around and do damage, as thieves are wont to do. The one on the left, the large Rogadin, will go invisible at the very beginning and will sneak attack someone. I don't believe they sneak attack the one with the most hate, because I feel like that would be very difficult to not be the tank, and I've never seen them attack the tank. The Barracuda on the right, on the other hand, simply stands still and throws shuriken the entire fight. Oh, and of note, after the sneak attack goes off from the one on the left, he makes himself visible and simply melees you until his business is done. So with the next 3 thoroughly impressed, we can now move on to the Storm Commander. The Storm Commander, I believe, is the head of the Grand Company. Which means, of course, he's going to be a bit of quite the threat. Only not really. He's more of a threat than many of the things we fought up until now, but not to an extreme extent. For the most part, simply don't stand in AoEs and you should be fine. Partway through the fight, he buffs himself up a little bit, so he's going to be hitting a bit harder from there, but still not really anything new. Perhaps we've inspired the lot of them to get a fair bit stronger. But we're not quite done yet. Finally, there's the Grand Storm Marshal himself. This is the Admiral's right-hand man. And the man who sent you out here in the first place to find if anything remained of Mistbeard's treasure. This man may be Mistbeard himself. So this fight primarily has two phases, and he starts not actually doing a lot of threat. Starts by wielding his axe. He's got some raid-wide AoEs and a very large conal AoE that he can use in front of him. There's some AoEs on the ground not to stand in, but overall the first part of the fight isn't that big a threat. And after a brief speech, he decides to kick the fight up a notch. He puts his axe away and pulls out his gun, and we're now fighting Mistbeard himself. I don't know if I did much of anything for this attack, but you should. When you see all the chests appear, look around for which ones the blue vials are going in. You need to open all of those treasure chests. If you do not open them, there will be an explosion, and you will likely die. The Granado shot is the next attack that he'll use, and it's not terribly big a threat, but it's very difficult to avoid. He'll put a slow effect on one player and then put a large AoE around them, and try as you might, you will not be able to run out of that AoE before the explosion goes off, getting you hit. Technically, I have actually made it out of it before, though I couldn't really tell you what I did to do it. I believe the slow effect can be Asuna'd off. Maybe that was it. Sprinting may also help, though I've not tried it. And then finally, he's got some powder kegs that he'll drop down on the arena, and much like the first boss of... I forget what it's called. It's the one that Midgardsormr was in. He'll target one of those and shoot it, which then explodes it. So you want the one he's going to shoot as far away from you as possible. If other powder kegs are near it, it will also blow them up. So really your best bet is just to get all of the kegs away from all of you. And then after the kegs, the fight repeats as it goes back to the various chests appearing. And that will really be the fight. No, never mind, it goes to Granado shot. Then it goes to the chests appearing. But we got our limit break off and he's down to 2%, so we're probably not going to be dealing with much of it. And with that, we've defeated even the legendary Mistbeard. Though in the end, a legend he may be, at the end of the day, he's still just a man. That's Hullbreaker Island Hard Mode. Until next time, everyone.